I'm Rosina, 29, and all my life I've chased my father's approval like a shadow that always stayed just out of reach. Every achievement was met with criticism, every effort deemed insufficient. But nothing prepared me for that moment at my cousin's wedding, when he publicly labeled me good for nothing in front of our entire family. What my father didn't know was that I had been living a double life for years, and his face when he finally learned the truth, worth every painful moment that came before. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to hide your true self from family. Your story matters too, and I'd love to hear it. My earliest memories of my father, Walter Bennett, are tinged with anxiety. Even at 5 years old, I understood that Walter Bennett's daughter had to be extraordinary. Ordinary was unacceptable. Our home in Wellesley, an affluent Boston suburb, was immaculate and imposing, much like my father himself. A successful investment banker with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, he applied the same exacting standards to his family as he did to his investment portfolios. Performance was everything. Emotions were inconvenient obstacles to success. Rosina, sit up straight. First impressions matter, he would say at dinner, reaching across the table to adjust my posture. I was 6. My mother, Grace, was beautiful and kind, but perpetually anxious. She floated around our house like a ghost, always trying to anticipate my father's needs before he voiced them. When he directed his criticism at me, her eyes would flash with momentary resistance before she looked away. She loved me deeply, but lacked the courage to challenge him. "Your father just wants what's best for you," she would whisper, after particularly harsh criticisms, stroking my hair as I tried not to cry. "He shows his love through his expectations." Kindergarten report cards were dissected like corporate earnings reports. My colorful finger paintings were acknowledged with tight-lipped nods, while my mathematics worksheets were scrutinized for errors. By first grade, I understood the family hierarchy. Achievement trumped happiness, and my father's approval was the currency we all traded in. "Your cousin Megan is already reading at a third-grade level," he mentioned casually over dinner when I was 7. "Perhaps we should look into a reading tutor for you." I was already reading above my grade level, but not as advanced as Megan. That night, I pulled all my books from my shelves and practiced reading aloud until my mother found me asleep among them at 11:30. The comparisons were relentless. My cousin Megan's perfect piano recitals, my classmate Jason's accelerated math placement, my father's colleague's daughter who won the regional spelling bee. Each achievement by someone else was presented not as inspiration, but as evidence of my inadequacy. The contrast between his treatment of me and my younger brother Tyler was stark and painful. Tyler, 4 years my junior, seemed to effortlessly earn the warmth and approval I desperately sought. His mediocre report cards were celebrated, while my excellent ones were examined for the single A- among the A's. "That's my boy," my father would say, ruffling Tyler's hair when he scored a goal in soccer despite his team's loss. When I won first place in the district-wide writing competition, his response was, "Writing won't pay the bills, Rosina. You should focus on practical skills." The science fair in 6th grade crystallized our dynamic perfectly. I had spent weeks creating an elaborate project about solar energy, building a small solar-powered car that actually worked. The night before the fair, as I was putting the finishing touches on my display board, my father walked by and paused. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, examining my project with critical eyes. "It's a solar-powered car," I explained eagerly, demonstrating how it worked. "See how it converts sunlight into electrical energy? I designed the circuit myself." He picked up the small car, turning it over in his hands. "The craftsmanship is sloppy. The solar panel is off-center. And didn't Ethan Montgomery do a similar project last year? I recall his won first place." My excitement deflated instantly. "I didn't know," I whispered, though it didn't matter. Ethan's project had been about wind energy, not solar, but contradicting my father never ended well. "Always research what's already been done before starting a project, Rosina. That's basic due diligence." He set the car down and walked away, leaving me staring at the project I'd been so proud of moments before. I won second place at the fair. When I showed him the red ribbon, his only comment was, "Second place is just the first loser." Music offered no refuge either. I loved playing the piano, but dreaded my recitals because my father would sit in the audience with his arms crossed, cataloging every missed note. My piano teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, once told him I had natural talent. Natural talent is worthless without discipline, he replied. She rushes the difficult passages. I developed coping mechanisms to survive my father's constant criticism. My journal became my confidant hidden beneath my mattress where he would never look. I sketched elaborate designs and wrote stories where young girls discovered magical powers and escaped to worlds where they were valued and celebrated. Books became my sanctuary. I could disappear into their pages, living temporarily in worlds where fathers hugged their daughters and said, "I'm proud of you," without qualifiers. The only adult who seemed to truly see me was my Aunt Vivian, my father's sister. Unlike her brother Vivian, was warm and artistic, having built a career as an interior designer despite their parents' disapproval. "You have a wonderful eye for color and composition, Rosina," she told me during one summer visit when she caught me sketching in the garden. "These designs are really something special." When my father overheard, he scoffed. "Don't put ideas in her head, Viv. She needs to focus on academics, not doodling." Aunt Vivian winked at me behind his back. "Your father said the same thing about my doodling. Now I make more money designing spaces than he thinks is respectable to discuss." That was the first time I realized I might have a path that didn't require my father's approval, but the habit of seeking it was already deeply ingrained. By the time I was finishing elementary school, my passion for design and visual storytelling was my most closely guarded secret. I would complete my homework with meticulous attention to detail, then lose myself for hours arranging and rearranging the elements of my latest design project, creating logos for imaginary companies or redesigning the covers of my favorite books. "What are you always doing in your room?" my father would ask suspiciously. "Just studying." I would answer quickly, covering my design work with school textbooks. It wasn't exactly a lie I was studying, just not what he thought. As I approached middle school, I became adept at being two different people: the dutiful daughter striving to meet impossible standards, and the secret artist finding joy and purpose in creation. I didn't yet know which one would eventually win out, but the battle was already taking its toll. High school intensified the pressure. My father's vision for my future crystallized around business economics and practical career paths. His own success in investment banking had convinced him that financial acumen was the only worthwhile pursuit. "You'll major in business or finance," he stated matter-of-factly during my freshman year. "With your grades, we should be able to get you into a decent program. Not Harvard Business, of course, but perhaps Boston University like I did." The "like I did" carried the weight of his expectations. I was to follow in his footsteps, but he'd already decided I would never quite fill them. I tried to conform. I joined the Future Business Leaders of America Club despite having no interest in business. I took AP Economics and gritted my teeth through every supply and demand curve. I participated in the investment club where students managed a mock stock portfolio, all while sketching logo designs in the margins of my notes. My class schedule became a battleground. I wanted to take photography and advanced art as electives. My father insisted on statistics and business computing. "Art classes are for students who can't handle real academics," he said dismissively. "No daughter of mine is going to waste her education on finger painting." The emotional distance between us grew with each passing year. Conversations became transactions, grades, reported criticisms, received improvements demanded. He didn't know my favorite color was cerulean blue, or that I stayed up late watching typography documentaries, or that I had started creating digital designs on the computer my mother had bought me for schoolwork. Everything changed sophomore year when I met Zoe Ramirez in my mandatory statistics class. Zoe was effortlessly cool with creative energy that seemed to radiate from her. Her parents were both working artists, her mother a painter, her father a sculptor, and their home was a creative haven unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The first time I visited, I stood speechless in their living room, taking in the vibrant paintings, handcrafted furniture, and the palpable sense of creative freedom. "Your house is amazing," I breathed, turning in circles to absorb every detail. Zoe shrugged. "It's just home. Kind of a mess, but we like it." It wasn't messy. It was alive in a way my perfect sterile house had never been. That afternoon, Zoe's parents asked about my interests and actually listened to my answers. When I hesitantly showed them some of my designs on my phone, they examined them with genuine appreciation. "You've got serious talent," Zoe's dad said, zooming in on a logo I'd created. "Are you thinking about design school?" The question hit me like a physical blow. The possibility had never been presented as an option. "My father wants me to study business," I replied automatically. Zoe's parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "And what do you want?" her mother asked gently. No one had ever asked me that before. The question lingered as I returned to my own home where my father was waiting with questions about my statistics test score. When I reported an A-, his frown made it clear that the minus was all he saw. The pivotal argument came just before junior year, when course selection forms were due. I had finally worked up the courage to select advanced art instead of the additional AP calculus course my father expected. He found the form on my desk before I could submit it. "What is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. "Advanced art. Have you lost your mind?" "I like art," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "I'm good at it." "You're good at wasting time, apparently." His face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything. These frivolous interests, drawing and painting while your classmates are preparing for real careers." "It's just one class," I argued, feeling a rare spark of defiance. "I'm still taking 5 AP courses." "One class now, then. What art school a lifetime waiting tables while you try to find yourself?" His voice dripped with contempt. "I didn't work 60-hour weeks to raise a good-for-nothing who throws away her opportunities on nonsense." There it was, the first time he used those words. Good for nothing. They hit like a physical blow, and I actually stepped back as if he'd slapped me. "I'm not," I began, but he cut me off. "No more discussion. You're taking AP Calculus. End of story." That night I cried in my mother's arms. The course selection form crumpled on my nightstand. "Why does he hate everything I love?" I sobbed. "He doesn't hate it, sweetheart." She soothed, though she sounded uncertain. "He just wants security for you." His own father was very hard on him about practical careers. "But it's my life," I whispered. She had no answer for that. The experience hardened something in me. If my father couldn't accept my passion, I would pursue it without his knowledge. With Zoe's encouragement and help from her parents, I began researching art and design schools in secret. The Rhode Island School of Design RISD became my dream, one of the best design programs in the country, and close enough to home that I could visit my mother, but far enough that my father wouldn't drop in unexpectedly. I worked on my portfolio in Zoe's bedroom, storing my art supplies in her closet. I stayed after school to use the art department's equipment. I saved money from babysitting jobs to pay application fees. And all the while I maintained the perfect GPA my father demanded, completing the business-oriented courses he chose for me. My mother discovered what I was doing when she found RISD brochures hidden in my room. Instead of exposing me, she sat on my bed with tears in her eyes. "You really love this, don't you?" she asked, looking through my portfolio. "More than anything," I confessed. She nodded slowly. "Your application fee for RISD, I'll take care of it. Don't use your babysitting money." Then she added almost to herself, "I should have taken care of a lot of things." With my mother's quiet support, I applied to RISD and 3 other design schools, along with the business programs my father had selected. When the RISD acceptance letter arrived, I felt a confusing mix of elation and dread. I planned the conversation carefully, choosing a Friday evening when my father was usually in a better mood after the work week. I made his favorite dinner pot roast with roasted potatoes and waited until he had taken his last bite before sliding the acceptance letter across the table. "What's this?" he asked, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "I got accepted to Rhode Island School of Design," I said, my heart hammering so hard I felt lightheaded. "For their graphic design program." There was a moment of silence as he stared at the letter. Then he looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning anger. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "I applied last fall. It's one of the best design programs in the country." How did you?" For once, my articulate father seemed at a loss for words. Then his face hardened. "Absolutely not. This isn't even open for discussion." Dad, please just consider. Consider what? Throwing away your education on some artistic fantasy, wasting tens of thousands of dollars so you can learn to doodle. He stood up his napkin, falling to the floor. If you think I'm paying for this, you're delusional. I can get student loans, I said, my voice shaking, scholarships, and saddle yourself with debt for a worthless degree. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. This conversation is over. You're going to Boston University for business like we planned. That's final. My mother, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Walter, maybe we should listen to what Rosina wants. Stay out of this, Grace, he snapped. Did you know about this? Her silence was answer enough. Unbelievable, he muttered. Both of you going behind my back. The argument that followed was the worst in our family's history. My father threatened to cut off all financial support if I pursued design. My mother cried. I vacillated between rage and despair. In the end, we reached a compromise that felt more like surrender. I would attend Boston University for business, and my father would pay my tuition. The acceptance from RISD was declined with a heavy heart, but I privately vowed this wouldn't be the end of my design aspirations. One way or another, I would find a path to the future I wanted. Boston University's imposing buildings felt more like prison than opportunity as I trudged to my first semester of business classes. I had chosen the marketing concentration as the least objectionable option, hoping it might occasionally intersect with my creative interests. My father had helped me move into my dorm room with an air of satisfaction, certain he had successfully redirected my wayward artistic tendencies. You'll thank me someday, he said confidently, as he arranged my business textbooks on my desk. This degree will open doors for you. He didn't notice the sketchbooks and design supplies hidden in the bottom drawer of my dresser. The first few weeks were miserable. Microeconomics made my eyes glaze over. Accounting principles felt like learning a language I had no interest in speaking. My classmates seemed genuinely excited about business models and market strategies, while I doodled logo concepts in my notebook margins. Then came the marketing design project in Professor Diana Chen's class. The assignment was simple: create a visual identity for a hypothetical startup company. While most students struggled with the design element, treating it as an annoying creative requirement in an otherwise analytical course, I threw myself into it completely. I stayed up 3 nights straight, crafting not just a logo, but an entire brand identity color palette, typography, packaging, social media templates. When I presented my work to the class, there was a moment of silence before Professor Chen spoke. This is professional level work, Rosina, she said, examining my presentation boards. Are you sure you're in the right program? The question hit too close to home. My father thinks I am, I replied before I could stop myself. Several classmates laughed, assuming I was joking. Professor Chen didn't laugh. After class, she asked me to stay behind. I recognize talent when I see it, she said directly. And you have serious design talent. But you don't seem particularly interested in the business aspects of my course. I stared at my shoes, afraid to admit the truth, but too tired to lie. I wanted to study design, I confessed. At RISD, my father insisted on business. Instead of the lecture I expected about respecting parental wisdom, Professor Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's not an uncommon story. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. How did you end up in marketing? Compromise and strategy, she said with a small smile. I got the business degree to please them, then built my career at the intersection of business and creativity. There are ways to navigate family expectations without completely abandoning your own dreams. That conversation changed everything. Professor Chen became my mentor, helping me chart a path that would satisfy my father's demands while secretly developing my design skills. Her advice was pragmatic. Finish the business degree, it won't kill you, but build your design portfolio simultaneously. When you graduate, you'll have options. And so began my double life. By day, I was a dutiful business student, grinding through financial analyses and market research projects. By night, I was a budding designer teaching myself Adobe Creative Suite programs and taking on small freelance projects under a pseudonym RB Designs. The workload was crushing. I slept 4 hours a night, fueled by coffee and determination. My roommate Kendra was the only person besides Professor Chen who knew what I was doing covering for me when I pulled all-nighters in the design lab and bringing me food when I forgot to eat. "You're going to kill yourself at this pace," she warned one morning, finding me asleep at my desk with my face pressed against my keyboard. "Is it really worth it?" "It has to be," I mumbled, accepting the coffee she offered. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" Financial challenges complicated everything. My father paid my tuition and a modest living allowance, but design software and materials were expensive. I couldn't ask him for extra money without explaining what it was for. Instead, I worked at the campus coffee shop 20 hours a week, using every spare dollar to invest in my secret career. My growing freelance business, still operating under my pseudonym, provided additional income but consumed what little free time I had. I designed logos for small businesses, created promotional materials for campus events, and even developed a book cover for a self-published author. Each project improved my skills and expanded my portfolio. But the secrecy was exhausting. The strain caught up with me during junior year. After 3 consecutive all-nighters, 2 for a major business presentation, and 1 to complete a rush design job, I collapsed during my morning marketing class. I woke up in the campus health center with an IV in my arm, and Professor Chen sitting beside my bed. "Dehydration and exhaustion," she informed me grimly. "They almost admitted you to the hospital." "Did anyone call my parents?" I asked, panic cutting through the fog in my brain. "Not yet. I convinced them to let me speak with you first." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Rosina, this can't continue. You're going to do permanent damage to your health." "I don't know what else to do," I whispered, tears threatening. "If I give up the design work, I'm giving up on what I really want. If I drop the business degree, I lose my father's support completely." "There has to be a middle ground," she insisted. "Maybe it's time to be honest with your father about what you're doing." The thought sent a chill through me. "You don't understand. He called me a good-for-nothing when I just wanted to take one art class in high school. If he knew I was secretly building a design career while supposedly focusing on business..." Professor Chen didn't push it, but she did help me restructure my schedule to create more balance. She also connected me with a therapist through the university's counseling services, who helped me develop coping strategies for the anxiety that had become my constant companion. My mother discovered the truth when she came to visit me at school and found my design portfolio out on my desk. I had stepped out to buy us lunch, forgetting to hide the evidence of my double life. When I returned to the dorm room, she was sitting on my bed, paging through my work with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I can explain." I began setting down the takeout bags. "These are beautiful," she interrupted, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Why didn't you tell me you were still designing?" I sat beside her, the food forgotten. "I didn't want to put you in the middle. Dad would be so angry if he knew." "I'm already in the middle, Rosina." She took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "I'm your mother. I should have fought harder for you to go to RISD." "It's okay," I assured her, though we both knew it wasn't. "This is working out in its own way. I'm building a portfolio while getting the business degree Dad wants." "At what cost?" She gestured to the prescription bottles on my nightstand, vitamins and mild anti-anxiety medication from my health center collapse. "You're running yourself into the ground." "I'm managing," I insisted. She didn't look convinced, but she promised to keep my secret. "I'll increase your monthly allowance," she said as she was leaving. "Don't argue, just use it for whatever you need for your design work. And promise me you'll take better care of yourself." I promised, though I knew the punishing schedule would continue. What choice did I have? Graduation approached with a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I had maintained a 3.5 GPA in my business program, not the 4.0 my father had expected, but respectable enough to avoid major criticism. Meanwhile, my design portfolio had grown impressive enough that Professor Chen believed I could land a job at a legitimate design firm right out of school. "Your work would be competitive even against graduates from top design programs," she assured me. "You've taught yourself more than most students learn in 4 years of formal training." My father attended my graduation with a satisfaction that made my stomach twist with guilt and resentment. He saw the business degree as vindication of his wisdom, proof that he had successfully guided me away from artistic folly and toward a sensible career. "I've arranged an interview for you at Merrill Financial." he announced at my graduation dinner. Junior marketing position. Not glamorous to start, but excellent growth potential. I pushed my food around my plate, avoiding my mother's concerned gaze. Actually, Dad, I was thinking of exploring different options. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. What options? Just different marketing environments, maybe something more creative. He frowned. Creative is code for unstable. Merrill is a solid company with excellent benefits. That's what you need to focus on at the start of your career. I nodded automatically, the familiar pattern of acquiescence taking over. But as I looked around the table at my family, my proud but controlling father, my worried mother, my younger brother Tyler, who watched our interactions with studied neutrality, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living a double life forever. Sooner or later, the truth would come out. The only question was whether it would be on my terms or through an accidental discovery that would be far more explosive. New York City welcomed me with its characteristic indifference, another young graduate with big dreams joining thousands of others trying to make their mark. I had chosen New York partly for its vibrant design community, and partly because it put some distance between me and my father's daily scrutiny. The story I presented to my parents was carefully crafted. I had accepted an entry-level position at Morrison Marketing, a mid-sized firm with a focus on financial services. The salary was modest but acceptable. The position would utilize my business degree while providing valuable experience. None of it was true. The reality was both more exciting and more terrifying. I had interviewed at Prism Design Studio, a small but innovative firm known for their bold approach to branding and identity design. My portfolio, created in secret over 4 years, had impressed them enough to offer me a junior designer position, despite my unconventional education path. Your work has a fresh perspective, the creative director had said during my interview. Formal design education often creates a certain homogeneity. You clearly found your own way. The deception required elaborate maintenance. I created a fake email address for the fictional Morrison Marketing. I researched actual financial marketing firms so I could pepper conversations with authentic-sounding details. I carefully tracked which lies I had told to which family members to avoid contradicting myself. Living arrangements presented another challenge. The junior designer salary at Prism barely covered rent for a tiny apartment in Washington Heights, shared with 3 other creative professionals. I took on freelance projects on weekends to make ends meet. When my father insisted on visiting, I claimed my apartment was being renovated and met him at his hotel instead. The financial district is changing so much, he commented during one visit, gazing around at the buildings near his hotel. Is your office near here? Not far? I said vaguely, feeling the now familiar twist of anxiety that accompanied each lie. Just a few blocks over. We should have lunch near your office next time, he suggested. I'd like to see where you're working. I nodded and quickly changed the subject mentally, adding another complication to my web of deceptions. Despite the stress of maintaining my false narrative, I thrived at Prism. Design wasn't just what I did. It was who I was. For the first time, I could openly embrace my passion and abilities without fear of criticism. My colleagues appreciated my work. My ideas were valued. My creative director became a mentor who pushed me to grow and experiment. 3 months into my time at Prism, I was assigned to the rebranding team for a local coffee shop chain. It was a small project by the firm's standards, but a significant opportunity for a junior designer. I threw myself into it, completely developing a concept that honored the company's neighborhood roots while giving it a more contemporary appeal. When the client approved my design over the senior designer's concept, I experienced a professional high I'd never known was possible. This wasn't just validation from professors or peers. This was a real client investing real money, choosing my vision over others. That night, I called my mother in tears of joy. They chose my design, Mom, I told her, my voice breaking with emotion. A real client chose my work. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful, she said, genuine happiness in her voice. Then more cautiously, does your father know you're working at a design firm? The question deflated my excitement instantly. No, he thinks I'm at a marketing firm for financial services. Her sigh carried the weight of years of similar deceptions. This can't go on forever, Rosina. At some point, you'll have to tell him the truth. I know, I admitted. Just not yet. Not until I've proven myself. But what would constitute proven in my father's eyes? A major client, a promotion, a certain salary threshold. The goalposts kept moving as my career progressed. 6 months into my job at Prism, I met Marco Alvarez at a design conference. Tall, with warm brown eyes and an easy laugh, he worked at a larger branding agency and had an effortless confidence I envied. We connected over our shared love of typography and exchanged numbers to discuss professional opportunities. Our first date lasted 6 hours dinner, extending into drinks, then a long walk along the High Line, talking about everything from design philosophy to family dynamics. I found myself telling him about my father, about the double life I was living. "That's a heavy burden to carry," he said, his expression serious. "Living a lie takes a toll even when it seems necessary." "What choice do I have?" I asked. "You don't know my father." He'd see this as a complete betrayal, not just of his expectations, but of his financial investment in my education. Marco considered this. "Maybe the better question is, how long can you keep living like this? At what point does the cost of the deception outweigh the benefit of avoiding confrontation?" It was a question I wasn't ready to answer, but as our relationship deepened over the following months, it became increasingly difficult to ignore. Marco was open with his family about his life and career. They knew about me, asked about me, wanted to meet me. In contrast, my father didn't even know what I really did for a living. "My parents are coming to the city next weekend," Marco told me one evening as we cooked dinner in his apartment. "They'd love to have dinner with us." The invitation filled me with equal parts excitement and dread. I'd love that too, but what exactly have you told them about me? He looked confused. "The truth. That you're a talented designer I'm crazy about. And they're okay with that, with you dating a designer." Understanding dawned on his face. "My parents aren't like your father, Rosina. My mom is a high school English teacher, and my dad manages a hardware store. They just want me to be happy and fulfilled. Your career choice wouldn't matter to them." The contrast with my own family experience was stark and painful. "That sounds nice," I said softly. Marco set down the knife he was using to chop vegetables and turned to face me fully. "You know what I think? I think your success would matter to your father if he knew about it. You're building an impressive career. You're supporting yourself in New York City doing work you love. Those are achievements any parent should be proud of." "You don't know my father," I repeated, the familiar refrain worn smooth from repetition. "No, I don't," he agreed. "But I know you, and I see how this secret eats at you. At some point, you'll need to decide if you're living for his approval or for your own fulfillment." The question lingered long after Marco's parents' visit, which was, as he had predicted, warm and uncomplicated. His mother hugged me like we were already family. His father asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Neither expressed any concern that their son was dating someone in a creative field. As my first year in New York drew to a close, the complexity of my deception increased exponentially. I had been promoted to designer, no longer junior at Prism, after the success of several projects. My freelance work had expanded to include 2 regular clients who provided steady additional income. Marco and I were discussing moving in together. Meanwhile, my father continued to believe I was climbing the corporate ladder at a financial marketing firm that didn't exist. During our weekly phone calls, I fabricated challenges with fictional coworkers and celebrated invented successes on imaginary projects. The breaking point nearly came when my father announced an unexpected business trip to New York. "I'll be in the city next Tuesday," he informed me during our Sunday call. "Let's have dinner, and I insist on seeing your office this time. No more excuses about renovations." Panic seized me. "Tuesday isn't good," I said quickly. "We have a major client presentation on Wednesday. I'll be working late." "All the more reason to have dinner," he pressed. "I'll bring it to your office. What time do you usually take a break?" My mind raced through potential excuses. "The whole team will be there. It would be disruptive to have a visitor." "Rosina," he said, his voice taking on the sharp edge I knew too well. "What aren't you telling me? Is something wrong with your job? Because if you're having trouble, I still have contacts at Merrill." Everything's fine, I interrupted. Tuesday won't work. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was heavy with suspicion. We'll talk about this when I'm in town, he finally said. I expect to see you presentation or not. After hanging up, I called Marco in a panic. He's coming to New York. He wants to see my office. What am I going to do? Marco, practical as always, helped me devise a contingency plan. I would tell my father I had recently changed jobs and was now working at a marketing firm in a different part of the city. The timing wouldn't allow him to visit the new office yet. It would buy me some time, though it added another layer to my already complex deception. The plan worked barely. My father accepted the news of my job change with suspicion, but no outright disbelief. Our dinner was tense, his questions probing for inconsistencies in my story. I stuck to it, hating myself for the lies, but seeing no alternative. As he was leaving, he said something that chilled me. I ran into Bill Morrison at a conference last month. Funny, he never mentioned you working at his firm. Bill Morrison, the fictional founder of my fictional first employer. Different Morrison, I said, the lie slipping out automatically. Common name. My father nodded, but his eyes held a calculation that suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. As his taxi pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk feeling sick with anxiety. How much longer could I maintain this charade, and what would happen when it inevitably fell apart? My cousin Emily's wedding invitation arrived 6 months later, the elegant envelope containing what felt like a ticking bomb. A family gathering of this magnitude would mean extended interaction with my father, multiple opportunities for my carefully constructed fiction to unravel. You should tell him before the wedding, Marco advised as I paced our newly shared apartment. We had moved in together 2 months earlier, another life development my father knew nothing about. In his mind, I still lived with my original roommates in an apartment I had vacated long ago. I can't, I insisted. A wedding isn't the right place for that kind of confrontation. Then when? Marco asked gently. It's been almost 2 years, Rosina. Your career is taking off. At what point do you stop hiding your success? He had a point. At 26, I had been promoted to senior designer at Prism. I had won an Emerging Talent Award from the American Design Association. I was regularly invited to speak on panels about branding and identity design. My career was flourishing beyond what I had imagined possible 2 years ago. And still, I couldn't bring myself to tell my father the truth. After the wedding, I promised, I'll find the right moment when we're back in Boston. A private conversation, not a public event. Marco looked skeptical, but didn't press the issue. I wish I could be there with you, he said instead. Me too. I had considered bringing Marco as my +1, but decided against it. Introducing my serious boyfriend while also potentially revealing my career deception seemed like too many bombshells for one family gathering. The wedding was held at the Boston Harbor Hotel, an appropriately elegant venue for Emily, who had always had expensive taste. As I entered the ornate ballroom for the reception, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the physical manifestation of anxiety that accompanied every family event. My mother found me first, embracing me with relief. You look beautiful, she said, holding me at arm's length to examine my navy blue dress. How are you doing? How's the new apartment? How's Marco? The barrage of questions reminded me that at least one person in my family knew the truth about my life. Everything's good, I assured her. Busy, but good. Your father's over by the bar with Uncle Robert, she warned in a lower voice. He's been asking questions about your job. I think Bill Morrison might have said something. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? Just specific ones, about projects' clients. More than usual. She squeezed my hand. Be careful. I nodded, scanning the room for my father's familiar figure. I spotted him by the bar as my mother had indicated, deep in conversation with my uncle. He looked the same as always, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his posture rigid with the self-assurance of someone accustomed to commanding respect. I delayed the inevitable greeting by circulating through the reception, catching up with cousins and family friends. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. What are you up to these days, Rosina? I'm working in marketing in New York. How exciting. What kind of marketing? Corporate communications, mainly financial services. The lies flowed easily after 2 years of practice, though each one left a bitter taste. I had become so accustomed to hiding my true achievements that even in this room full of people who should have been celebrating my success, I found myself diminishing and disguising it instead. Eventually, there was no avoiding my father. I approached the bar, plastering on a smile. "Hi, Dad." He turned, his expression warming slightly. "Rosina, you made it." He offered a brief formal hug. "Your mother said your flight was delayed." "Just a little. Weather in New York?" Another small lie to explain my late arrival, which had actually been due to a client meeting that ran long. "How's work?" he asked, signaling the bartender for another scotch. "Busy. Good." I kept my answers vague, hoping he wouldn't press for details. "I've been trying to get a clearer picture of what you're doing these days." He continued, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "The marketing field is so diverse. What exactly is your role now?" The direct question sent a wave of anxiety through me. "Project management mostly. Client communications. The usual." At which firm exactly, the name seems to slip my mind. He knew. Somehow he knew I had been lying. The realization sent ice through my veins. "It's a small agency." I began scrambling for a plausible explanation. "We've recently—" "Robert," my father interrupted, turning to my uncle. "Didn't you say your company just hired a new marketing team? Maybe you've crossed paths with Rosina's firm." My uncle looked between us, clearly sensing tension, but uncertain of its source. "Possibly." "What's the agency called, Rosina?" Before I could formulate another lie, my Aunt Linda appeared at my side, saving me with her effusive greeting. "Rosina, look at you, absolutely gorgeous. How's the big city treating you?" The conversation shifted, giving me a momentary reprieve. I excused myself as soon as politely possible, retreating to the restroom to collect myself. My hands trembled as I gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection in the mirror. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. "Just get through tonight. One more night of pretending." The reception dinner was a formal affair with assigned seating. I found myself at a table with several cousins, their spouses, and to my dismay, my parents. My father had been unusually quiet during the cocktail hour, observing me with calculated interest that set my nerves on edge. The first course had just been served when my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who had always been fond of me, asked the question that would change everything. "Tell me about your work, Rosina," she said warmly. "Grace mentioned you've been doing well in New York, but she's light on details." Before I could offer my practiced vague response, my father interjected. "Yes, Rosina, tell us about your work. I'm sure everyone would be interested to hear exactly what you're doing these days." There was an edge to his voice that caused several heads to turn in our direction. The challenge in his tone was unmistakable. "I'm in marketing." I said, the familiar lie sticky in my throat. "Corporate communications." "How fascinating," my father said with exaggerated interest. "And which clients do you work with? Any names we might recognize?" The trap was closing around me. I took a sip of water, playing for time. "Dad, this probably isn't—" "I'm just taking an interest in my daughter's career," he interrupted. "Is that so unusual?" The table had grown quiet, the other guests sensing the undercurrent of tension. My mother was staring fixedly at her plate, her fingers worrying at her napkin. "I work with various clients," I said carefully, "mostly in the financial sector." "How interesting," my father continued, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed atmosphere that had descended over our table. "Because I ran into Bill Morrison again last week. He was quite certain he'd never employed anyone named Rosina Bennett." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face as every eye at the table turned to me. "I never said I worked for Bill Morrison." I attempted, though we both knew it was futile. "No, then which Morrison was it? Because you've been suspiciously vague about your employer for nearly 2 years now." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "What exactly are you hiding, Rosina?" The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken accusations. I could continue lying, inventing another fictional employer, another explanation. Or I could finally tell the truth. Before I could decide, my aunt asked innocently, "Did they serve you the salmon, Rosina?" "They gave me the steak, but I think they mixed up our orders." I glanced down at my plate. Indeed, the server had given me the steak entree when I had requested salmon. It was such a mundane concern amidst the unfolding drama that I almost laughed. "No, I ordered the steak," I said automatically. My aunt looked confused. "But at Emily's bridal shower, you said you didn't eat red meat anymore. Something about a project you were working on for a vegan client." My father's eyes narrowed. "Vegan client, I thought you worked with financial companies." The walls of my carefully constructed deception were crumbling around me. I opened my mouth but found no words. "She's always been like this," my father said to the table at large, his voice carrying more than necessary. "Making up stories, avoiding practical realities. I pushed her toward a sensible career in business, but clearly she's still chasing fantasies." "Walter," my mother cautioned, but he was on a roll now. "She's always been a good-for-nothing." He continued the familiar phrase, cutting through me like a blade. "Can't even hold down a proper job in the firm I recommended." The table fell silent. My cousin Emily, passing by our table to greet guests, froze at my father's words. Other nearby tables quieted as heads turned in our direction. "Walter," my mother gasped, finally finding her voice. "That's enough." But the damage was done. The words hung in the air, public and undeniable. Good for nothing. The label he had applied to me since childhood now broadcast to our extended family in the middle of a celebration. Something inside me, something that had been bending and accommodating for 29 years, finally snapped. I stood up slowly, my napkin falling unnoticed to the floor. "Excuse me," I said quietly, and walked away from the table with as much dignity as I could muster. In the elegant hotel lobby, I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I called Marco. "He called me a good-for-nothing," I said when he answered, my voice surprisingly steady. "In front of everyone at the wedding." "Oh, Rosina," Marco breathed. "I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, "but I think I'm about to be." "What do you mean?" "I'm done hiding," I said, a sense of calm clarity washing over me. "It's time for the truth." After hanging up, I took a few moments to collect myself. I opened my professional Instagram account, the one my father knew nothing about, and scrolled through images of my work. Award-winning campaigns, published interviews, client testimonials, evidence of a successful career built on talent, hard work, and passion. Then I walked back into the reception, head held high. My father was still at our table now, deep in conversation with my uncle, likely doing damage control after his outburst. Several family members shot me sympathetic glances as I approached. "Dad," I said, clearly interrupting whatever he was saying. "I'd like to speak with you." He looked up, annoyance flickering across his face. "This isn't the time, Rosina." "Actually, it's the perfect time," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "You just called me a good-for-nothing in front of our entire family. I think that warrants a response." The surrounding conversations hushed as people turned to watch our confrontation. My father glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the audience, but unwilling to back down. "If you're going to offer more excuses about your job situation," he began. "No excuses," I interrupted. "Just the truth. You're right that I haven't been working at a marketing firm for financial services." His expression shifted to vindicated satisfaction. "I knew it. So what have you really been doing? Waiting tables, bouncing between temp jobs." I took a deep breath, then handed him my phone open to my professional profile. "I'm the founding creative director of Bennett Design Collaborative. We're a boutique design studio specializing in brand identity and visual storytelling. We have 15 employees and a waiting list of clients." My father stared at the phone, confusion replacing his smug expression. "What is this? My actual career," I said. "The one I've built while you thought I was failing at the career you chose for me." He scrolled through the images on my phone, his brow furrowing. "This is some kind of joke." "The North Star financial rebranding campaign you praised last month," I continued. "That was my firm, my design. You said it was impressively clean and modern when you saw it in the Wall Street Journal." The color drained from his face as he continued scrolling, taking in photos of me accepting awards, speaking at conferences, leading client presentations. "You're R.B. Bennett?" he asked incredulously, reading my professional byline. "The R.B. Bennett that redesigned the Apex Tech interface?" "Yes," I confirmed. "That's me." My father looked up from the phone, meeting my eyes with an expression I'd never seen before: confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been dawning respect. "But why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, though his voice had lost its edge. "Because you called me a good-for-nothing when I wanted to take art classes in high school," I said simply. "You made it very clear what you thought of creative careers." The silence that followed was broken by my Aunt Vivian, who had approached our table during the exchange. "I knew it," she said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "I've been following your work for years, Rosina. That Meridian Hotels campaign was brilliant." "You knew?" my father asked his sister incredulously. "Of course I knew," Aunt Vivian replied. "I've been in the design world for 30 years, Walter. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own niece's work even under a pseudonym? The talent was obvious." Other family members began to gather around, pulling up my website on their phones, exclaiming over projects they recognized. "You were featured in Design Quarterly last month," my cousin Jason said, showing me the article he'd just found online. "How did I miss this?" "The same way everyone did," I replied. "I've been hiding it." My brother Tyler pushed through the small crowd that had formed. "I knew too," he admitted sheepishly. "I've been following your work since college. I didn't want to get in the middle." One by one, family members expressed their admiration for my work, their surprise at my secret success, their confusion about why I had kept it hidden. Through it all, my father remained silent, still holding my phone, still scrolling through the evidence of the career he had tried to prevent. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "You did all this while pretending to work in marketing?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I built my career in the spaces between your expectations and my reality." "But why?" he asked again, and for the first time I heard genuine bewilderment rather than anger in his voice. "Why not just tell me?" "Because you made it impossible," I said, my voice finally breaking. "You decided when I was a child that creativity was worthless, that art was a waste of time. You called me a good-for-nothing for wanting to pursue what I loved. What choice did I have but to hide it?" The reception around us had come to a standstill, guests openly watching our confrontation. Emily, the bride, stood nearby with tears in her eyes. My mother had moved to stand beside me, her hand resting supportively on my back. My father looked around at the gathered faces, then back at me. Something shifted in his expression, a crack. In the facade of certainty he had maintained my entire life. "I was wrong," he said quietly, the words so unexpected that I wasn't sure I'd heard them correctly. "What?" "I was wrong," he repeated more firmly this time. "About your career choice. About a lot of things, it seems." It wasn't a full apology, but from my father, it was unprecedented. I felt lightheaded, as if the ground beneath me had suddenly shifted. "You've built something impressive," he continued, handing my phone back to me. "On your own terms. Without my help, in fact, despite my interference." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know whether to be proud or ashamed." "Both would be appropriate," my Aunt Vivian interjected dryly, earning a sharp look from my father. "We should talk," he said to me. "Not here. Not now. But soon. There's clearly a lot I don't know about your life." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The adrenaline of confrontation was ebbing, leaving me shaky and emotional. As the gathered family members began to disperse, returning to the celebration, my father remained seated, staring into his scotch with a troubled expression. For the first time in my memory, he looked uncertain, even vulnerable. My mother squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I think so." I replied, the truth of it surprising me. "I think I'm better than I've been in years." The weight of deception I had carried for so long had finally been lifted. The truth was out, messy, uncomfortable, but liberating. Whatever came next with my father would be based on reality, not fiction. For the first time since childhood, I felt truly seen. As I rejoined the wedding reception, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about my work, I felt a new sense of freedom taking root. I had spent my life seeking my father's approval, contorting myself to fit his narrow definition of success. Now finally, I had claimed my own path on my own terms. My father's face when he realized the truth, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning recognition would stay with me forever. It was the moment he finally saw me not as the daughter who had failed to meet his expectations, but as the woman who had exceeded them in ways he had never imagined possible. The days following Emily's wedding passed in a blur of emotional processing and long overdue conversations. I extended my stay in Boston, knowing that the revelations at the reception were just the beginning of a necessary reckoning with my father. Our first real talk happened 3 days after the wedding at a quiet cafe near my parents' home. My father arrived precisely on time, dressed in his usual business attire, despite it being a Saturday. Some habits, it seemed, weren't ready to change. "I've been looking at your company website," he said after we had ordered coffee, jumping straight to the point in his characteristic way. "You've built something significant." "Thank you." I replied, the words feeling strange in this context. My father had rarely offered direct praise, and never for my creative work. 15 employees, he continued. Multiple industry awards, clients I recognize and respect. He shook his head slowly. All while I thought you were floundering in entry-level marketing positions. That was the impression I wanted you to have, I admitted. It seemed easier than fighting for your approval of what I really wanted to do. Was I really so terrifying? He asked, and the genuine confusion in his voice surprised me. So unapproachable that you felt you needed to construct this elaborate deception. I considered his question carefully. Yes, I finally said. From the time I was a child, you made it very clear that artistic pursuits were worthless, that creative careers weren't real jobs. You called me a good-for-nothing for even wanting to take art classes. He winced at the reminder. I never meant... What did you mean, Dad? I interrupted, years of suppressed questions finally surfacing. When you compared me to every cousin and classmate who was pursuing the paths you approved of, when you dismissed everything I was passionate about, what did you mean if not to make me feel worthless? My father stared into his coffee cup, uncharacteristically silent. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual commanding tone. My father was an artist, he said quietly. Did you know that... The revelation stunned me. No, you never mentioned him. He was talented, genuinely talented. But he was also irresponsible, unreliable. He chose his art over everything else, including his family. His jaw tightened at the memory. We lived in a cramped apartment with past due notices piling up, while he spent money on supplies for sculptures that never sold. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I had never heard this story before. My father rarely spoke about his childhood. When he left us, I was 14, he said he needed to follow his creative vision. That was more important to him than his wife or his son. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I swore I would never be like him. I would be practical, responsible, successful. And I wanted the same security for you. So you pushed me away from anything creative because of your father's failures. I thought I was protecting you, he insisted. I thought I was saving you from disappointment and instability by making me feel like my natural talents and interests were worthless. He flinched. I never meant to make you feel worthless, Rosina. I was trying to direct you toward what I thought was a better path. But it wasn't your decision to make, I said gently. It was mine. We sat in silence for a moment, the years of misunderstanding and hurt stretching between us like a great chasm. But for the first time, I could see the outline of a bridge that might someday span it. I would like to understand your work better, my father said finally, to see what you've built, if you're willing to share it with me. It was such a small request, and yet it represented a monumental shift in our relationship. My father, who had spent my entire life telling me what to do, was now asking to learn from me. I'd like that, I replied. The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had. I showed him my portfolio on my tablet, explaining the thought process behind different designs, the challenges of building a studio from scratch, the business aspects that had actually been helped by the degree he had insisted I pursue. To my surprise, he asked thoughtful questions. He admitted when he didn't understand certain concepts. He expressed genuine interest in the creative problems I had solved for clients. You have your grandfather's eye, he said at one point, studying a particularly complex branding system I had developed. The way you balance elements, the attention to detail. It reminds me of his best work. The comparison to the grandfather I had never known, the artist my father had rejected, felt like a profound concession. As our coffee grew cold, my father asked the question I had been expecting. Why didn't you tell me when you started succeeding? Surely, once you had established yourself one recognition, you could have revealed the truth. I considered this. I thought about it many times, but the longer the deception continued, the harder it became to find a way out. And honestly, I was afraid. Of what? That even with evidence of my success, you would still disapprove. That you would find a way to diminish what I had accomplished, because it wasn't what you had planned for me. His expression clouded. Have I really been so rigid, so controlling? Yes, I said simply. For as long as I can remember. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. Your mother has said similar things over the years. I didn't listen as I should have. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco. How's it going? Need rescue? I smiled and typed a quick reply. Better than expected. Talk later. Your boyfriend? My father asked, noticing my expression. Yes, Marco. He's been encouraging me to have this conversation with you for almost 2 years. He sounds sensible, my father observed. I'd like to meet him sometime. Another small opening, another step toward something new. He'd like that too, I said, and meant it. As we prepared to leave the cafe, my father hesitated, clearly struggling with something he wanted to say. I'm not good at apologies, he finally admitted. They've always felt like admissions of failure to me. Maybe they're actually opportunities for growth, I suggested. He considered this. Perhaps. In any case, I owe you one. A significant one. He met my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Rosina, for not seeing you clearly, for trying to make you into something you weren't meant to be, for making you feel you needed to hide your true self from me. The apology so long awaited brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. I'm proud of you. He added the words clearly unfamiliar in his mouth. Not because of your success, though, that is impressive. I'm proud of the strength it took to forge your own path, even when I was standing in your way. We walked back to my parents' house in a companionable silence that felt entirely new. Nothing had been fully resolved. Years of hurt and misunderstanding couldn't be healed in a single conversation. But something had shifted fundamentally between us. In the days that followed, my mother observed our changing dynamic with cautious optimism. He's been looking up your projects online, she confided, showing them to his friends, bragging about you actually. The idea of my father proudly sharing my design work seemed surreal after so many years of hiding it from him. My conversation with Tyler revealed another surprise. I almost followed you into design, my younger brother admitted during a private lunch before I returned to New York. I've always been more interested in architecture than finance, but after seeing how Dad reacted to your interest in art, you chose the safer path. I finished for him. He nodded. I'm not unhappy in finance, but sometimes I wonder what might have been. It's not too late, I told him. If that's what you really want. Maybe, he said thoughtfully. Seeing you stand up to Dad at the wedding, it was inspiring. And his reaction wasn't what I expected. Me neither, I admitted. People can surprise you, I guess. When I finally returned to New York, Marco was waiting at our apartment with dinner prepared and a bottle of champagne chilling. To new beginnings, he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. And to no more hiding. No more hiding. I agreed, the words tasting of freedom. The full healing of my relationship with my father would take time, years of therapy for me. A slow thawing of his rigid worldview. Many more conversations that oscillated between painful and productive. But the foundation had been laid that day at the wedding, when the truth finally shattered the walls of deception I had built around myself. 6 months after the revelation, my father attended the opening of our studio's new office space in Soho. He stood somewhat awkwardly among the creative professionals and clients who filled the industrial loft space, nursing a glass of champagne and observing the environment I had created. This is quite impressive, he said, gesturing to the design awards displayed on a shelf behind my desk. You've achieved more by 29 than most people do in a lifetime. I had something to prove, I replied with a small smile. He nodded, understanding the unspoken part of my statement. I had been trying to prove my worth to him, to myself, to the world that had been told I was good for nothing. "Mr. Bennett," a young designer from my team approached hesitantly. "I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you. Rosina talks about you all the time." My father looked surprised. "Does she—" "Yes, sir. She says her business acumen comes from you, that you taught her the importance of understanding the financial side of creative work. It's one of the reasons our studio is thriving when so many others struggle." As the designer moved away, my father turned to me with a raised eyebrow. "Business acumen. You did teach me valuable things," I acknowledged, "just not the only valuable things." Later that evening, as we stood together looking out over the New York skyline from our office windows, my father said something that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I'm starting to understand what you see in this world you've created," he said quietly. "The balance of creativity and strategy, the problem solving, the vision." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever need business advice for the studio expansion plans, that sort of thing, I'd be happy to help. Only if you want it, of course." It was an offer of partnership, of contribution on my terms rather than his. A recognition that my path, though different from the one he had envisioned, was valid and worthy of respect. "I'd like that," I told him. "We're considering opening a second location in Boston next year. Your input would be valuable." The smile that spread across his face, proud, genuine, unguarded, was worth every difficult moment of the journey that had brought us here. The greatest lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about design or business or even family dynamics. It was about the courage to be authentically yourself, even when those closest to you don't understand or approve. It was about the power of perseverance, of believing in your own vision when no one else does. And perhaps most importantly, it was about the possibility of growth and reconciliation, even after years of misunderstanding. I often think about that moment at Emily's wedding when my father's face dropped in pure shock as he learned who I really was, not the failure he had assumed, but a success on my own terms. That moment marked the end of one chapter in our relationship and the beginning of another one, where we are slowly learning to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. Have you ever had to stand up for your dreams against someone who didn't believe in them? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reveal your true self. Thank you for listening to my journey from hiding to healing. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be who you really are, unapologetically and authentically.